Hello, and welcome to The Turbulent World with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu has fractured a long-standing pillar of Israeli foreign policy that dictated it always needed to ensure the backing of the United States. Fixing the pillar may prove easier said than done. U.S. President Joe Biden's insistence that U.S. support for Israel is ironclad, despite the conditioning of arms sales, is rooted as much in the president's deep-seated commitment to Israel, as it is a tactical reminder of the risk to Israel of surrendering a principle that enabled Israel to do what it wanted. To be sure, past U.S. presidents, including Ronald Reagan, have put the U.S.-Israeli relationship on the line to pressure Israeli leaders. However, this time may be different, despite Mr. Biden's instinctive support for the Jewish state. While not irreversible, Mr. Biden's pausing of the delivery to Israel of heavy payload 2,000 and 5,000-pound bombs and threats to condition further arms sales suggests that the days are gone in which Mr. Netanyahu could boast about U.S. support. Speaking on Israeli television in the 1980s, when he first served as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, and then as Ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. Netanyahu bragged, "We have the Senate, the Congress, and a record-strong Jewish lobby. We have a strong influence over the general support in America. America won't force us into anything." Contrast that with Mr. Biden's change of U.S. policy in recent days, demands by congressional Democratic members demanding a halt to U.S. arms sales, nationwide pro-Palestinian protests at U.S. university campuses, and opinion polls showing that more than half of Americans disapprove of Israel's war conduct. Moreover, Israel, long a master in dominating the narrative and catering to Western media's needs, has lost the plot. Not only has Israel severely restricted media access and gone as far as banning Al Jazeera from reporting from Israel, but it no longer seems able or willing to provide credible information and arguments. To be sure, defending the policies of the most far-right, ultra-nationalist, and ultra-conservative government in Israel's history would be challenging under any circumstance. Even so, Israeli government spokesman Avi Haiman demonstrated Israelis' loss of the plot in a lengthy interview on Piers Morgan Uncensored, the prominent British journalist's popular YouTube talk show. Interviewed against the backdrop of numerous allegations of violations of international law in Gaza, and on the day of the reported discovery of yet another mass grave at a hospital in the Strip that Israel's forces attacked, Mr. Haiman was flustered and speechless when asked by Mr. Morgan how many Palestinian civilians had been killed in the 7-month-old war. "We don't have exact figures. As you know, it's the fog of war," Mr. Haiman answered, unable to explain why Israel had precise numbers of fighters it says it killed, but not for the civilian casualty toll. Mr. Haiman remained silent for painful seconds when Mr. Morgan challenged him by saying, "You literally have no idea how many civilians you killed. That's complete nonsense. Why are you authorized to give me the number of terrorists you killed, but not a number of civilians? I don't understand. You want me to believe that you are incredibly careful about how many civilians you are killing, and you have an amazing exemplary record, but you don't know how many civilians you are killing? So how do I know you've been careful?" Israel has consistently rejected the Gaza Health Ministry's figure of more than 34,000 deaths and more than 75,000 wounded in the 7-month-old war. without providing alternative numbers. Still, it asserts it killed 14,000 Palestinian fighters. Analysts suggest that Mr. Netanyahu's abandoning of a pillar of Israeli foreign policy amounts to submitting to blackmail by his ultra-nationalist and ultra-conservative coalition partners, who have threatened to collapse the government if the Prime Minister fails to launch an offensive in Rafah. While that may be true, Mr. Netanyahu's affinity with Israel's far-right and religious ultra-conservatives may not be just an opportunistic move to save his political skin. His empathy for the religious ultra-conservatives, despite being secular in outlook, dates back to the days when he felt confident about the U.S.-Israeli relationship. At the time, Mr. Netanyahu forged a relationship with the Brooklyn-based Lubavitch Hasidic rabbi Menachem M. Schneerson, leader of one of the most influential movements in religious Jewry. Mr. Netanyahu described Mr. Schneerson, who died in 1994, as the most influential Jew of our time. Mr. Schneerson fiercely opposed an Israeli withdrawal from territories it conquered in the 1967 Middle East War. He called the principle of withdrawal in exchange for peace with the Palestinians and Arab states a fixture of Israeli policy abandoned by Mr. Netanyahu, an illusion of peace. Addressing the United Nations General Assembly years after Mr. Schneerson's death, Mr. Netanyahu quoted the rabbi as telling him, "You will be serving in a house of darkness, but remember that even in the darkest place, the light of a single candle can be seen far and wide." That advice may be guiding Mr. Netanyahu as much as his willingness to sacrifice Israel's national security interests and the lives of Hamas-held hostages to prolong his embattled political life. Mr. Netanyahu's invocation early in the war, echoed by Israeli politicians and military personnel fighting in Gaza, of the biblical command to attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys, fits the mold of Mr. Schneerson's thinking. Although challenged by numerous rabbinical scholars over the centuries, Mr. Schneerson led ultra-conservative rabbis in the 1980s in popularizing and applying to Palestinians the concept of Amalek, the grandson of Esau and his descendants, and anyone else who lived in their Canaanite territory. The ultra-conservatives view Amalek as the archetype of evil, symbolic of Israel and the Jews' nemesis. While Mr. Netanyahu may be a cat with 9 lives who will grab any opportunity that serves his personal interests, Mr. Schneerson and his fellow ultra-conservatives offer the Prime Minister religious legitimization of policies that have deprived Israel of its moral standing and put at risk a key pillar of Israel's ability to defend itself. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and column. The Turbulent World with James M. Dorsey depends on the support of its readers. For the past 12 years, I have maintained free distribution as a way of maximizing impact. I'm determined to keep it that way. However, to avoid putting up a paywall, I need the support of a core of voluntary paid subscribers to cover the cost of producing the column and podcast. If you believe that the column and podcast add value to your understanding and that of the broader public, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. You can do so by clicking on Substack on the subscription button at www.jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Thank you, take care, and best wishes.